존경하고 사랑하는 국민 여러분, 국가적 위기 속에서 숨 돌릴 틈도 없이 닻을 올린 국민 주권 정부가 이제 1년이 됐습니다. 지나간 1년보다 앞으로 4년이 더 기대되는 정부가 되겠습니다. 지난 1년보다 더 무거운 책임감으로 주어진 사명을 이행하겠습니다. 나라의 주인인 위대한 대한 국민들께서 우리 대한민국의 새로운 도약을 위한 힘찬 여정에 언제나 함께 해 주실 것으로 믿습니다. 지금까지 그랬듯 5,200만 주권자들의 지혜를 등불 삼아 국민이 주인인 나라, 함께 행복한 대한민국을 향해 거침없이 나아가겠습니다.
Millennial and Gen Zs are reshaping the world. Youth generation shares their fresh perspectives on what's trending now. From global developments to everyday culture, we're diving into the stories that matter. This is Youth Generation.
Held its first debate over the weekend.
The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Boosting Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the Status UN summit.
A massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday.
Arirang.
In our headlines on this Tuesday, June 9th, here in South Korea, President Lee Jae-myung departs on a 10-day trip to Europe today that includes Belgium, Italy, the Vatican and France, aimed at advancing pragmatic diplomacy. And the South Korean benchmark Kospi regains the 8,000 mark as investors engage in a buying spree on this Tuesday, bolstered by tech gains on Wall Street. Meanwhile, findings for the month of April show spending by foreign tourists here in the country soared to a new high at well over 1.3 trillion won, up nearly 55% on year. President Lee Jae-myung has embarked on a 10-day trip to Europe today that begins in Belgium, then takes him to Italy as well as the Vatican before ending in France. That being said, our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin gives us a preview of his agenda in Belgium.
President Lee Jae-myung has begun his first trip to Europe since taking office, aiming to deepen ties with the European Union and key partners across the continent. His first stop is Belgium, which has had the 125 years of diplomatic relations with Korea as of this year. After meeting with members of the Korean community on Tuesday, Lee is scheduled to hold talks with Belgian Prime Minister Bart de Wever in Brussels on Wednesday morning.
As the first meeting between the leaders of our two governments since the launch of the current administration, we expect discussions on practical ways to elevate bilateral cooperation to the next level.
Seoul is particularly interested in expanding economic cooperation with Belgium, home to the port of Antwerp, Europe's second-largest seaport. In the afternoon, Lee is set to meet European Council President Antonio Costa and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen.
The European Union is the world's largest trading bloc and Korea's third-largest trading partner. As a partner that shares our commitment to democracy, market economics, and a rules-based international order, the EU is essential to Korea's ambition to emerge as a G7+ diplomatic power.
Trade and security cooperation are expected to top the agenda. Bilateral goods trade between Korea and the EU reached a record $136.8 billion last year. Also likely to be discussed is intelligence sharing and combating transnational crimes, building on the EU-ROK Security and Defense Partnership launched in 2024. After Belgium, EU will travel to Italy, the Vatican, and France. 송유진, Arirang News.
The South Korean economy expanded 1.8% on quarter during the first 3 months of this year, higher than an earlier estimate supported by strong facility investments and stellar overseas shipments. Our Kim Do-yeon files this report.
Korea's real gross domestic product expanded 1.8% in the first quarter of 2026 compared to the previous quarter. According to the Bank of Korea's preliminary data released Tuesday, this represents a 0.1 percentage point upward revision from the central bank's advanced estimate. On a yearly basis, the economy grew 3.8%. The stronger reading was supported by final data indicating faster than expected progress in display and semiconductor investments. Overall facility investments surged 6.6%, while private consumption increased 0.6%. Exports advanced 5.9% on quarter, heavily backed by global demand for IT products like semiconductors.
The 0.1 percentage point upward revision to the first quarter real GDP will act to raise the annual growth rate by 0.1 percentage point for the entire year.
The most notable shift during the first quarter was the unprecedented surge in national income. Nominal GDP jumped 10.5% on quarter, marking the highest level since the first quarter of 1976. Real gross national income rose a record 9.2% from the previous quarter, sharply outpacing actual production growth. The central bank added that the GDP deflator rose 12.9% year-on-year due to the surge in semiconductor export prices, which significantly improved corporate profitability. The central bank attributed the unusual income surge directly to these improved terms of trade.
As the price of our key export, semiconductors, has surpassed the price increases of energy like crude oil, our main import, an unusual situation has occurred where GDI has significantly outpaced GDP.
If this corporate performance and nominal growth trend continues, Bank of Korea officials project the nation's per capita gross national income could reach its next major milestone much earlier than the previously anticipated target of 2028. For 2025, per capita GNI stood at $36,963. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, on the local bourse, the benchmark Kospi regained tangible ground on this Tuesday, bolstered by tech gains on Wall Street. Our Kim Jun-hong covers this rebound as well as efforts to address the weakening won. Korea's benchmark Kospi bounced back sharply on Tuesday, just a day after a steep market sell-off. The index closed at 8,096.93, up 8.18% from the previous session, with strong early buying triggering buy-side sidecars, 1 time each for both the Kospi and Kosdaq. After opening more than 2% higher, the Kospi extended gains through the day and reclaimed the 8,000 level. The rebound recovered much of the previous day's losses when the Kospi plunged more than 8% and the Kosdaq over 9%. A rebound in U.S. tech stocks overnight helped lift markets, with semiconductor shares leading the advance. Easing tensions in the Middle East helped cool oil prices, adding to positive mood. However, analysts say optimism and concerns surrounding the chip sector continue to drive sharp market fluctuations.
While concerns over semiconductor demand may pressure chip stocks temporarily, the underlying fundamentals remain unchanged. That helps explain why markets continue to rebound after corrections.
Pressure in the currency market also showed signs of easing. The $1 exchange rate closed at 1,512.1 won on Tuesday, down 22.91 from the previous session.
The move marked a pullback just a day after the currency opened at its highest opening level in 17 years. Monday's pledge by the government and central bank to respond firmly to excessive currency volatility helped calm markets.
The authorities' verbal intervention, along with forward dollar sales by the National Pension Service, appears to have eased pressure on the currency market. Easing foreign outflows from local equities also contributed to the move.
Still, government measures are widely seen as capable of slowing excessive moves rather than reversing the broader trend. Markets are now looking ahead to U.S. inflation data due later this week, seen as the next key catalyst. The outcome could influence expectations for the upcoming Federal Reserve meeting, with any hawkish signals likely to pressure the won further. Kim Jun-ho, Arirang News.
And on Wall Street, as mentioned earlier, the stock market there secured some ground on Monday as tech shares recovered some of last week's sell-off. Our Lee-Sing-jae has the numbers.
Wall Street regained some ground on Monday after last week's sharp sell-off as technology stocks tied to the artificial intelligence boom rebounded and helped lift investor sentiment. The S&P 500 rose 0.3% after suffering its biggest one-day decline since October on Friday. The Nasdaq Composite gained 0.9%, while the Dow Jones Industrial Average slipped 80 points or 0.2%. Leading the recovery were semiconductor and memory chip makers, which had seen a heavy sell-off amid concerns that AI-related stocks had become overvalued. Those worries had also weighed on Asian markets, with South Korea's Kospi falling more than 8% on Monday's trading, as shares of major tech companies including Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix came under pressure. Despite the recent sell-offs, experts say semiconductor stocks are still a strong buy.
So there is a lot of appetite from smart investors to continue to fund this whole investment cycle in AI, and that's going to filter down to, again, parts of the technology sector like semiconductors.
U.S. memory chip maker Micron Technology jumped nearly 10% on Monday, recovering from a steep decline on Friday. Investors were encouraged by news that SK Hynix and AI chip giant NVIDIA have entered a multi-year technology partnership to develop next-generation memory products for AI infrastructure. While some initially viewed the agreement as a potential threat to Micron, analysts noted that NVIDIA did not designate SK Hynix as an exclusive supplier. That reassurance helped ease concerns that Micron could lose market share. Investors also took comfort from comments by NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang, who said the company has certified Micron, SK Hynix, and Samsung Electronics as suppliers of its latest high-bandwidth memory technology, known as HBM4. The developments reinforced expectations that demand for advanced memory chips will remain strong as AI investment continues to expand, helping stabilize technology shares after a volatile end to last week. Lee Sing-jae, Arirang News.
And back here in South Korea, on the eve of his departure from Seoul, NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang reaffirmed his confidence in South Korea's prospects of success in AI-related ventures while urging greater government support for AI startups. Our business correspondent Park Jun-han covers his remarks and more.
Before wrapping up his visit to Korea, NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang explained the reason for his trip and the significance of the deals announced while here.
Today, Korea is world leader in heavy industry and manufacturing. Korea is also world-class in electronics. And it's very interesting that it's very unique that Korea is also among the world's leaders in software and AI. That is very unique. Korea is great at all of it. This is a unique situation. Korea is maybe only after United States and China in AI research.
Huang made the comments before the Korea AI ecosystem reception, a closed-door meeting of tech leaders in Korea to discuss advancing AI in Korea. To support this AI ecosystem, NVIDIA is expanding its ties with domestic tech giants, including Samsung Electronics, SK Hynix, Hyundai Motor Group, LG Group, Doosan, and Naver. Huang revealed that the partnerships will create unprecedented economic value.
We're going to bring in enormous amounts of investment. We're also going to, of course, build AI factories, AI research centers. I think it is very easy to say that over the next 5 years, hundreds of billions of dollars of revenues will come into Korea. That's our gift.
Beyond massive corporate deals, Huang urged investment into Korean AI startups, calling the country a fantastic place to build the future of technology. Following the media scrum, Korea's ICT Minister Baek Yong-hun shared the government's response. Baek said NVIDIA had agreed to co-invest in the domestic AI ecosystem alongside the government.
On AI investment, we agreed that if Korea is to become one of the world's top 3 AI powers, the focus should not be limited to semiconductors, AI infrastructure, or AI models led by large corporations. Strong AI services are equally important. The government has therefore decided to support investment in the broader AI ecosystem, including AI services.
Wrapping up his schedule in Korea, Jensen Huang left Korea on Tuesday morning, saying he was grateful for the opportunity to partner with Korea and that he expects to return in the near future. Park Junan, Arirang News.
In other news now, spending on K-culture by foreign tourists to South Korea soared almost 55% on year in April to hit a fresh high. Our correspondent Chung Hae-rim covers this reality, its reasons and broader implications.
Korean culture tourism is boosting the country's economy as foreign visitor spending linked to cultural activities reaches a record high. According to the Korea Tourism Organization's Visit Korea Data Lab, Korean culture consumption totaled 1.328 trillion won, or approximately $873 million in April. The figure marks the highest monthly total since the agency began tracking the data and represents a more than 54% increase from a year earlier. Culture consumption, or global Hallyu consumption, tracks spending by foreign visitors on activities including concerts, shopping, beauty, fashion, and cultural experiences.
I think mostly we bought like skincare products, maybe like also a lot of sunscreen. So we pretty much went everywhere, but mostly it's like Myeongdong and Hyundai for activities.
K-pop global hitmakers BTS held the band's historic comeback concert here at Gwanghwamun Square in March. Spending topped 1 trillion won, or about $658 million for the first time that month, and climbed even higher in April.
Tourism officials point to BTS's return as a major driver behind the surge, but spending wasn't limited to concerts. From K-pop merchandise and Korean beauty products to food, visitors are increasingly engaging with various aspects of Hallyu during their stay.
So far, we've bought a lot of clothes and K-pop albums. I really like bulgogi and like Korean like hot pot and stuff. I think I've always really been interested in the culture. Like growing up, I liked K-pop a lot, and it's so pretty here.
Shopping accounted for the largest share of spending in April at 38.4%, followed by beauty and wellness, fashion, lifestyle food, and Korean cuisine. Tourism officials say these categories continue to attract visitors from around the world, helping turn the global popularity of Hallyu into a growing source of economic activity. Chung Hae-rim, Arirang News.
Despite speculation here in South Korea, the latest summit between the leaders of China and North Korea that took place in Pyongyang earlier on Monday did not address prospects of nuclear disarmament on the Korean peninsula. Our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
Chinese President Xi Jinping and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un held a rare summit in Pyongyang on Monday, emphasizing military relations with no public mention of denuclearization. The talks were held at the Kumsusan State Guest House on the first day of Xi's two-day state visit to North Korea, his first in 7 years. According to China's CCTV, Xi called for stronger political trust and practical cooperation, and also proposed closer exchanges in diplomacy, law enforcement, and military affairs. He also called for expanded cooperation in trade, agriculture, construction, science and technology, and healthcare, as well as more people-to-people exchanges through reopened border crossings, civil aviation, and international passenger rail links. The North Korean Central News Agency said the two leaders agreed to open a new chapter in bilateral ties by strengthening high-level strategic communication and expanding exchanges across politics, the economy and culture. However, the summit produced no reference to denuclearization, despite renewed attention on the issue, after Washington said last month that Presidents Donald Trump and Xi Jinping shared the goal of denuclearizing North Korea. Seoul had also been watching the visit closely, hoping China's engagement with Pyongyang could support peace and stability on the Korean peninsula.
China has absolutely no reason to aggressively push a denuclearization agenda. Seoul appears to be hoping that China can play a mediating role and help revive North Korea-US dialogue and even inter-Korean dialogue. We place a lot of expectations on mediation, but I do not think China is willing at this point to bear that burden.
My sense is there's not going to be a big breakthrough on denuclearization or transformation on Korean Peninsula issues. She is likely not to ask Kim Jong-un to engage with Lee Jae-myung because, Kim has made it clear it's an internal issue for North Korea, and this diplomacy will not be dictated by outsiders.
Instead, the two leaders repeatedly emphasized strategic coordination, sovereignty, and security. Regarding the Kimchi summit, Seoul's Unification Ministry noted on Tuesday that it was the first time the two sides mentioned military exchanges, with defense chiefs also unusually present at the talks. Officials say the summit reaffirmed traditional ties while paving the way for expanded high-level cooperation. On Tuesday, Kim and Xi visited an educational facility in Pyongyang and the North Korea-China Friendship Tower, a monument honoring Chinese soldiers killed during the Korean War before Xi's return to Beijing. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
And in the Middle East, Israel and Iran have halted their rampant trading of recent fire following warnings from U.S. President Donald Trump. Our Kim Bo-kyung has the latest.
Following a rapid escalation of hostilities in recent days, Iran and Israel have announced a pause in their military operations against each other. That followed a post from U.S. President Donald Trump on Truth Social on Monday, in which he said both sides are looking to do an immediate ceasefire. According to Axios, on Monday, Trump spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and warned him that if Israel went back to war with Iran, he might find himself fighting alone. On Sunday, Trump told Fox News that Tehran should stop firing missiles, return to the negotiating table, and make a deal. Iran's Islamic Revolution Guard Corps announced the end of missile attacks on Israel on Monday, but did warn of harsher attacks if strikes against Lebanon continue.
Qadam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters stressed in the statement that if aggression and malicious acts continue, including in southern Lebanon, much harsher and more crushing actions will follow.
Israel also confirmed a cessation of attacks, adding it would respond with force if Iran attacks again.
At the moment, the fire has ceased, because after we struck the terrorist regime in Tehran, it stopped attacking us. If the terrorist regime makes the mistake of attacking us again, we will respond with force.
On Sunday, Iran fired around 10 ballistic missiles toward northern Israel for the first time since a ceasefire was agreed in April, in retaliation for Israel's strikes against the pro-Iranian militant group Hezbollah in the southern suburbs of Beirut, Lebanon. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. Confirmed Ebola deaths in the Democratic Republic of Congo passed 100 on Monday as armed groups continue to block health workers from reaching the hardest-hit areas. Congo's government reported 35 new confirmed cases and 10 deaths in a single day, bringing the total deaths to 101 and confirmed cases to 550 across the conflict-ridden provinces of Ituri, North Kivu, and South Kivu. A burial team was attacked at a cemetery in Bunia on Sunday, leaving 2 people seriously injured. The World Health Organization Director General visited Uganda on Monday and urged it to reconsider its border closure with Congo, saying blanket travel restrictions do not stop Ebola. Uganda has confirmed 19 cases, mostly linked to people who crossed from Congo. In the Philippines, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake off the southern island of Mindanao on Monday killed at least 35 people and injured more than 130. It also triggered tsunami warnings across several countries before they were canceled 6 hours later. The quake struck about 20 kilometers off the coast of Sarangani province early in the morning as schools were reopening after a long break. Buildings collapsed in General Santos City, home to around 700,000 people, and more than 200 aftershocks followed, including one measuring 6.7. Tsunami warnings were issued for the southern Philippines, northern Indonesia, Malaysia, and Australia before being lifted. Leftist Congressman Roberto Sanchez overtook conservative Keiko Fujimori in Peru's presidential count on Monday with 94% of ballots tallied. Sanchez held 50.01% against Fujimori's 49.99%, with rural votes still being counted. Fujimori had led exit polls and early results, but her margin narrowed through the night. Sanchez has proposed a major overhaul of Peru's economic system and reforms to large mining concessions in the world's 3rd largest copper producer. A final result is not expected until July. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
Skies were clear nationwide today. Cooler, drier air will keep temperatures close to seasonal averages through the middle of the week. Tomorrow, most regions will enjoy plenty of sunshine, while the capital area and Gangwon-do province will remain mostly cloudy. Rain is expected from the morning through the evening in northern inland Gyeonggi-do province and northern and central inland Gangwon-do province. Elsewhere, sunny skies will allow UV levels to climb to very high levels in many areas. Strong sunshine will also lead to elevated ozone levels. Unlike UV rays, ozone cannot be blocked with a hat or umbrella, so it's best to limit outdoor activities during the hottest part of the day. Tomorrow, Seoul will start the day at 17 degrees Celsius, Daejeon at 15 degrees, Busan at 17 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 26 degrees, Daegu at 30 degrees, Gwangju at 29 degrees. On Thursday, scattered showers are expected across central areas and parts of Gyeongsang-buk-do province. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.
Countless people, their garments in order, move forward in line. At the very front, the official in charge of the royal funeral seems to bear a heavy burden. A ceremonial horn called the daegak, along with those carrying gongs and drums, add to the weight of the procession. Court attendants who serve the king and queen at close quarters, and the royal secretaries, the seungji, also walk on in quiet grief. The red palanquins seen throughout the procession carry precious items meant to honor the spirit of the deceased. Seals of the king's title and deeds, and palanquins bearing mourning's texts and instruments follow in solemn order. This book, which records all these scenes in detail, is the 의궤 for the funeral of King Sukjong, one of the 외교장각 의궤. Containing the entire process from the king's passing to the enshrinement of his spirit tablet, this is so-called 의궤 for royal perusal, a volume once seen by the king himself. After major state events, Joseon left detailed comprehensive reports, from preparations and protocols to the people involved and the budget, guiding future generations to follow precedent. However, in 1866, these precious records were taken by French forces and had to leave their homeland. In 2011, after 145 years, the 외교장각 의궤 returned from France. Now, in the King's Archive of the National Museum of Korea, they bear witness to Joseon's rigorous record-keeping and artistic dignity. Having found their rightful place after great hardship, these royal records are no longer a frozen past, but a living legacy we must carry into the future.
Chinese leader Xi Jinping sits down with his North Korean counterpart Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang for a summit earlier on Monday that follows back-to-back meetings between Xi and US President Donald Trump as well as Russia's Vladimir Putin in Beijing last month. Hello and welcome to Tuesday's edition of Press Perspective for June 9th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Details of the discussions between Chinese leader Xi Jinping and his North Korean host Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang have been disclosed. And pundits believe this latest trip and subsequent talks may have sought to reassert China's influence over North Korea in return for economic benefits. For more on this, I have Thomas Maresca with American news agency UPI here in the studio. Thomas, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Thanks. Great to be here.
I also have Professor Min Jung-hoon at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy with us in the studio. Professor Min, it's great to have you here.
Yeah, my pleasure always.
Right, Thomas, we start with you. So let's begin with the summit that took place between Chinese leader Xi Jinping and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang back on Monday.
Yes, so we have reports basically from the state media of both countries. So, you can sort of take it for what it's worth, I guess, in the sense of their reporting, these kind of just very specifically kind of controlled accounts of what's going on. And, what we saw was Xi arriving in Pyongyang yesterday, and a lot of, pomp and circumstance. Kim Jong-un and his wife met Xi at the airport. They went by motorcade into the city. There was a big welcoming ceremony at Kim Il-sung Square, kids with balloons and military bands, 21-gun salute. Then we heard they held talks on Monday after that. And, basically both sides reported they vowed to strengthen ties, expand cooperation. That was really the nature of it. From the Chinese side, Xi called for increasing high-level exchanges, talked about helping out in fields like trade, agriculture, construction, technology, mentioned reopening border crossings more, flights, trains, just kind of pushing more of this, high-level exchanges, people-to-people exchanges. Kim called Xi, the greatest state guest, noted that North Korea was Xi's first foreign visit this year, kind of highlighted that, mentioned support for China's One China principle regarding Taiwan, and called maintaining the relationship a top strategic priority. So, it was kind of standard issue state media affair. I think more of the focus from observers has been kind of on like what hasn't been said or trying to read between the lines. I'm sure, Professor Min will cover more of that. But, I would note one of the top things that I think stuck out to observers was that no mention of North Korea's nuclear program and really no mention, I don't think from what anyone I saw at least, of anything broader relating to the Korean Peninsula at all. And this is in contrast to when Xi's last visit, which was in 2019, he did mention that China would work toward the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, is usually how they phrase it. And, we really haven't heard that from China in a while. They haven't come out and outright supported North Korea's nuclear program, but at the same time, they have stopped sort of talking about it explicitly. We even saw that under Trump's visit to Beijing last month, in the readouts of their meetings. The White House did say, China and the U.S. agreed to work toward the denuclearization of Korean Peninsula, but the Chinese version only said they discussed issues on the Korean Peninsula. So, I think that's something that stands out as kind of a moment of notice among observers. And I think they also did talk a bit about both sides about heightening security and sovereignty, and Xi mentioned working together against hegemonism and power politics in an essay he wrote for Rodong Shinmun, which is kind of their euphemism for pushing back against U.S. and international sanctions, and so there's some element of that as well. But yeah, again, it's more about reading between the lines, I think, for observers.
Right. And speaking about reading between the lines, Professor Min, what do you believe was the purpose of this particular trip by President Xi Jinping to North Korea?
Well, basically, I think Xi Jinping's visit to North Korea this time is a return visit after Chairman Kim Jong-un visited Beijing for China's Victory Day celebration last September. And there, Kim Jong-un stood alongside with Xi Jinping and Putin at the military parade. And for both countries, this year marks the 65th anniversary of the treaty between Pyongyang and Beijing. And it literally gives the two countries to have regions to reaffirm their alliance and deepen economic ties. And it was expected that the summit would cover the various issues such as economic ties and Korean Peninsula issues, but As he mentioned, they did not talk much about Korean peninsula issues, but they focused on how to enhance their political and diplomatic coalition and economic ties as a whole. But for China, this visit could serve as a chance to reaffirm its influence over the Korean peninsula. It follows Xi Jinping's summit with the U.S. and Russian leaders in Beijing last month. And specifically, I think this visit contains China's intention to take the initiative for reshaping the Northeast Asian order by consolidating the bilateral relationship between North Korea and China and possibly the trilateral cooperation among China, Russia, and North Korea. In addition, China is likely to track the growing ties between North Korea and Russia, although it promotes the trilateral cooperation between the North Korea, China, and Russia. And last month, North Korean troops marched for the first time alongside with Russian forces in Moscow's Victory Day parade. And as you know, the North Korea and Russia have got closer after North Korea sent the troops for Russia in the ongoing Ukraine war. So overall, it is likely that China will restore its influence over North Korea through Xi Jinping's visit to Pyongyang this time. So I think that the Chinese influence over the Northeast Asia and the global community is getting wider and deeper, I think.
Right. Meanwhile, here in South Korea, Thomas, ahead of the Chinese leader's departure for North Korea, the Lee Jae-myung administration voiced hopes for Beijing's role to promote peace on the Korean peninsula. Could you tell us a bit more about this?
Right. So, yeah, we've seen a few different kind of statements from the government ahead of the, Xi visit, basically from the Blue House, and I think Foreign Ministry said basically the same thing, expecting China to play a, quote, constructive role in addressing issues related to the Korean peninsula and hoping that the dialogue would contribute to peace and stability. The unification minister, Chung Dong-young, also last week had proposed a four-way dialogue involving the two Koreas, the United States and China, to establish some sort of peace regime on the Korean peninsula. So, I think there's been, and Lee Jae-myung himself has spoken, when he met with Xi in Shanghai, asked Xi to kind of play the role of a mediator. Basically he's acknowledged, that North Korea is not responding to South Korea's outreach efforts. So he asked Xi to help as as a mediator, and I think Xi had told him, you need to be patient, something like that. And obviously Lee has also expressed, desire for President Trump to have a dialogue with Kim Jong-un and act as maybe a peacemaker. So I think, Seoul sees that it's in a position where North Korea is not eager to interact with them and is looking for these outside parties that may have more influence or leverage on North Korea to play a role, and certainly, is looking to China to potentially play some sort of role. I mean, Lee also, who had his first year anniversary press conference yesterday, and he talked about just the role, where South Korea is in terms of its goal of denuclearization with North Korea. And he really mentioned, not giving it up as a long-term goal, but in the short term, just kind of having maybe more narrow hopes for what could be accomplished. Talked about halting additional production of nuclear materials, not exporting nuclear materials overseas, maybe suspending ICBM technology development and kind of negotiating based on that. And it's just, again, it's kind of a very different landscape than the last time she visited in 2019, or that sort of period of diplomatic activity around that era, the first Trump-Kim summits. I mean, North Korea has made it clear that denuclearization is not on the table for them at all. I mean, Kim Yo-jong, the sister of Kim Jong-un, made another statement this weekend right before Xi's visit that it was, irreversible, and called it an anachronistic dream to pursue denuclearization. And, of course, Kim Jong-un last week also toured a new uranium enrichment facility to show off their growing nuclear program. So clearly, you know, they're sending a message as well about where things stand ahead of this Xi visit.
Right, now against this backdrop then, Professor Min, what more can you tell us about the gains that North Korea's Kim Jong-un looks to secure from this latest visit by the Chinese leader?
Well, I think that North Korea got some benefits from China this time. Most of all, North Korea will be able to recover its ties with China through the summit with Xi Jinping. And again, this year is 65th anniversary of the treaty between the two countries. And Xi Jinping's visit to North Korea this time is a clear signal that the two countries will strengthen their cooperation in the coming months and years. In addition, economically, North Korea will be able to enhance its economic cooperation with China. As you know, North Korea struggled with economic recovery due to the international sanctions and the border closures in terms of the COVID-19. Of course, in recent years, North Korea has survived through its cooperation with Russia. But it's not enough for the country to thrive economically, just to necessity for its own economic survival. So North Korea needs to recover its economic cooperation with China because, as you know, China is North Korea's largest trading partner and actually the lifeline of the North Korean economy. And since last year, the two countries, North Korea and China, have begun to expand the trade and people-to-people exchanges by restoring passenger trains and air travels that had been suspended due to the COVID-19. And as a way of enhancing their economic cooperation, it was likely that they talked about how they would develop border regions, utilize the Nasan Special Economic Zone, and use waterways in the lower Duman River in the summit. We don't know details, but it is very likely that the countries, the leaders, talked about those the important things. And the last but not least, as Thomas mentioned, North Korea will try to obtain an approval for its nuclear capabilities from China. Again, the Kim Yo-jong, the Kim Jong-un's sister, declared that North Korea's nuclear status is absolutely irreversible, and Kim Jong-un himself inspected the nuclear material production facility right before Xi Jinping's visit. It's not the usual move before North Korean leaders would get the Chinese leader in terms of the official state visit, you know. Anyway, by not including the issue of North Korea's denuclearization in the outcome of the summit, North Korea will get the China's de facto acknowledgement of its possession of nuclear weapons. So we will see what actually they will work on those kind of issues. So, you know, I think things get more complicated in terms of the denuclearization of North Korea.
Right. And against this backdrop, Thomas, I believe Mr. Xi Jinping has been invited to the White House by Mr. Trump in September, I believe. September 24th, if I'm not mistaken. What appear to be the prospects of that particular summit? And what would be the broader implications of that face-to-face if it does indeed occur?
Yeah, so, you know, I don't think there's been any news that it's not going to happen as planned, or not that I've seen. You know, and I think generally speaking, you know, it seems to be kind of more of a sign that the countries are looking to keep the relationship relatively stable. I mean, what is going on at that moment with all of the geopolitical sort of upheavals that we've seen? It's, you know, it's hard to say exactly what will be the hot topic by the time it rolls around. But, you know, I think generally speaking, you know, I think observers expect it will be kind of more of these, similar to their first meeting in Beijing, you know, just more small scale deliverables. You know, there really weren't these big strategic breakthroughs at their last meeting. I mean, one thing that's a little on the calendar is that in November, the sort of trade truce that they struck in Kuala Lumpur when they met is due to expire, you know, which sort of froze some of the tariffs and the rare earth export controls that China had imposed. So that's due to expire in November. So maybe that's a, you know, obviously something that may be a conversation about extending that or where that's going to be. And, you know, otherwise, I think the agenda items would probably be following on the stuff that they discussed in Beijing. More about maybe just details on some of these Chinese purchase commitments, with the agriculture and aircraft. They had established this board of trade or board of investment, so probably more on that. And there's still, there is a lot of unresolved issues around technology and export controls that I think China's eager to see advanced. I mean, they didn't really get into a lot of talks about AI guardrails, that kind of stuff, digital infrastructure, cybersecurity. And, another big one that was really didn't seem to have much discussion at the time was Taiwan, as a factor. I mean, China raised it as, the most important issue, but they didn't really land on any sort of strong, I think Trump didn't concede that, we're not willing to, defend Taiwan or something like that, but at the same time, left open the idea of using, arms sales to Taiwan as a kind of bargaining chip, which hasn't really been done before by U.S. presidents. So, I think that's going to be there. And obviously, wherever we are with the Middle East is still going to be a major issue. And perhaps we'll see North Korea come up. It didn't really also come up much this last time as well. And, we'll see if Trump is still eager to meet with Kim Jong-un or to discuss, nuclear freeze or nuclear or denuclearization. So that's another possibility.
Right. And with regard to a potential meeting with North Korea's Kim Jong-un, President Lee Jae-myung has highlighted the importance of dialogue between the two Koreas. The most recent remarks to this end, as Thomas mentioned earlier, were made, I believe, during a press conference to mark the first anniversary of his administration back on Monday. I wonder, Professor Min, what are your thoughts with regard to the possibility of such engagement between the two Koreas, and what conditions might facilitate such communication?
Well, basically, it's truly hard to improve the inter-Korean relations nowadays. But I just talk about what the Lee Jae-myung government is trying to do in terms of the North Korean policy. The Lee Jae-myung government has been trying to foster a framework of the peaceful coexistence on the Korean Peninsula by pursuing tension reduction and denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. But as you know, for the tension reduction, Lee government is pursuing tension reduction on the Korean Peninsula, like it made the reciprocal secession provocative actions, like using the loudspeakers at the DMZ and sending balloons to North Korea. And it also wanted to restore communication channels such as military hotlines, but it's still working. And but still, it's very slow in terms of the restoring and facilitating the inter-Korean relations, because the North Korea is very hard and rigid in terms of the resisting the improving inter-Korean relations or its relations with South Korea, based on the hostile two-state doctrine. And in the meantime, for the North Korea's the denuclearization, Lee government made it clear that North Korea's nuclear and missile capabilities must be addressed without any delay, and it tries to enhance the situation by the facilitating its communication and cooperation with the United States. And but still, it's really hard to make a progress in terms of the denuclearization of North Korea, because North Korea doesn't want to talk anyone in terms of that issue. Anyway, currently, I think that resuming North Korea-U.S. summit diplomacy would be the one last momentum to restore the talks between North Korea and the United States. In the past, under the Moon Jae-in government, South Korea was a driving force in terms of the improving inter-Korean relations, would facilitate the North Korea-U.S. relations, and probably studied the Korean Peninsula peace process. But again, now, unfortunately, nowadays, it's not easy to improve inter-Korean relations. So only momentum nowadays is that based on the President Trump's diplomatic capabilities, based on his personal connection with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, resuming North Korea-U.S. summit diplomacy would be the only left hope for South Korea. So that's why my President Lee Jae-myung focused on the pacemaker role for the U.S. and South Korea. So Lee Jae-myung government and tried to foster the North Korea-U.S. summit diplomacy so far, but it's not easy. So currently, unfortunately, there's no active sign of engagement between the two Koreas and no viable and recognizable contact between North Korea, U.S. But now that we got the consecutive summit meetings between U.S., China, North Korea, South Korea, and other important political actors. So there could be some possibility that diplomacy will work sooner or later. But not easy. But anyway, I hope that diplomacy would be working again in the coming months.
All right. On that optimistic note, we shall end today's discussion then. Professor Min, as always, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you so much.
Thomas, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Right, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. As always, thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow. That is Wednesday for more panel discussion.
The world is no longer connected.
We are moving in different directions.
How far and fast can this actually